this is Harry Watt with North Carolina State University Wood Products Extension. This is the 2021 National Firewood Workshop. We're being hosted by the Tennessee Division of Forestry, and we're getting assistance from a media sponsor is Sawmill Magazine out of Maine. We're also being assisted by the Virginia Division of Forestry and the North Carolina Forest Service. We're here today with Geoff Friedman of Lost Coast Resources of California. He is a high-volume bundle producer and buyer reseller, and he has some unique ideas and knowledge, and he's going to share it with us. So I want everybody to pay attention. Geoff is really, we talk about what's behind the curtain. Geoff knows what's behind the curtain. So if you're a bundle person and you wonder what's going on in the big world, Geoff is your guy to find out. So please pay attention. Geoff, what can you tell us?
Well, one of the things as this industry has evolved and matured is that the biggest thing as a manufacturer and distributor that we're always looking for is consistency and transparency. In other words, your product stands for you, and if you're going to sell to somebody like us, which fits in during the country, certain areas that we need to be fit into, if it's a fit, you need to manufacture it to our specifications. Now, some manufacturers want 15-inch wood in length. Some people want 16-inch wood or a variation there in between. The biggest thing about consistency is that you consistently have the same bundle. So your length size need to be the same. Your width size need to be the same. Your total diameters need to be extremely consistent so they pack on a pallet consistently, and so that consumers can pull it off a pallet and the pallet maintains its integrity so it doesn't fall on a consumer, and then you have a lawsuit. So there's a number of things that go into just, I make a bundle of firewood. The plastic has to be the right gauge. It has to have the right stretch to it. The pallet has to be a good pallet. It has to be put on a pallet so that the bundles tie together. And you have to use the right gauge shrink wrap to shrink wrap the pallet, which would include doing netting and other things so that the bundles won't, I guess the proper word for saying is sweat inside the pallet because the plastic is wrapped around them. And that doesn't mean that the wood isn't properly cured. Unless you get wood down to zero content of moisture, there's always going to be a little moisture that comes out. So if you put it around plastic and then you put plastic around that, add a little heat to it, it will get some moisture on it. So you want to avoid that, because when it comes into the big warehouses, they look at every pallet, they inspect it as it comes off the truck, and if it's wrong, they turn it around. So it's not worth getting it wrong. It's better to get it right. It's better that your integrity shows that you're never going to let something go out of your plant that might be sketchy. So we spend a lot of time working out specs with our manufacturers. We spend a lot of time making sure that the quality control and the quantity control is consistent and that they meet our specifications. Extremely important. When you're dealing with big boxes or big companies that compete with big boxes, you want to make sure that your product stands up and is a little bit better than others. For instance, some manufacturers now, instead of raising their prices, are lowering their quantity of their bundle size. We've seen significant decreases from a 0.75 to a 0.65 to a 0.60, but yet the prices either stay the same or actually go up some. Well, that's a consistent pattern in our market that we see for people trying to stay consistently competitive. But the fact of the matter is, whether you're a producer, a middle guy, or the end guy, we really have to look at what the market is. Firewood is the downside of everything. In this market, of 100% of the domestic lumber produced, 80% of it goes offshore. Well, we've had some embargoes and some other problems like COVID, so they're really not shipping anything offshore and haven't been for a couple of years. So that 20% that's left goes into the domestic market. But as we all know, that market is down significantly because of COVID. So which means they haven't been harvesting logs and they haven't been going to sawmills. Those sawmills are just now coming out of mothballs, but guess what? You can't get labor. So prices are starting to skyrocket up. We've seen lumber prices go up 300%, in some cases even more. So you have to stay ahead of that curve. You have to make sure you don't get hit with increases that you can't cover when you're selling these big companies, because you have a contractual obligation to fulfill. That's kind of on the supply side. When you're talking about some of the other things that happens, there's regulatory problems on a state-by-state basis. You need to meet the regulatory requirements from each state. You have to work with the state regulators. It used to be just the federal regulators. Now you have to contact every state and make sure that the proper, if you meet their specifications, they'll give you a seal to put on your label. So you have to make sure wherever your product goes, and if it goes to multi-states, you have to have multi-state seals on it, or make sure that that state has a comprehensive working agreement with the other state. So it takes a lot of work to be a multi-state manufacturer, quote, distributor. And the maze of the game is one thing. The other side is trying to sell these big boxes. And you have to go in with a pretty good financial statement and the ability to show them that you can consistently operate and carry inventory for at least 30 days or more. One of the things that we've noticed in some of these big boxes is they now want you to be their bank. And what I mean by that is they want you to put your product on their floor and they'll pay you as they sell it. So basically it's called flooring, and the pay by scan system does work. It does allow you to mark your product up a little bit so that you can account for any theft or loss, what have you. And they're fine with that, because the more you mark it up, the more margin they make. Problem is you have to carry that inventory until it sells. They'll pay you right away, but it's got to go through the register and scan. So Lowe's, Depot, and some of those places have now adopted that as a policy. So unless you're able to meet that, you can't even make a presentation to them. And nowadays they're asking for financial statements and proof and validity that you can manufacture and have, and who's your resources. They want to know more stuff than you know. So they want to make sure that they don't get burned. But it has turned into a more mature industry. And in that, they expect forecasting and planning and to get ahead of the game. This last year, as a manufacturer, we were able to sustain our orders and not lose anything. We stayed within our means and our realm of who we sold to. But we also let them know well in advance that there was going to be shortages. And we were very transparent about what we could do and we couldn't do. And they gave us the orders that we needed in order to fulfill them and make them look good at a time when a lot of other people were out of wood. And we know that because we got all the calls. And we were happy to turn a lot of them down because we wanted to support the people that we're selling to.
Well, Geoff, it sounds like, if you want to play with the big boys, you got to be serious. You have to pay attention to all the details. And, one of the questions like you've just answered here is we have to work with our state people here in North Carolina and Tennessee. Our Department of Agriculture has taken over the KIL certification program. Other states should be doing the same, but what else would get us in trouble that we have to watch out for?
You need to make sure, the biggest thing is when you get all done at the end of the day, that you've packed the right quantity into the bundle and that you have the fair stated value of what it is. And you can't miss. If you say it's a 0.75, you can be right at a 0.75, but if you're a fraction of an inch below it, it doesn't qualify. And that's probably the biggest problem that you would have. So one of the things that we specify in our work with all our yards is that the wood has to be produced to a little bit bigger specification. In other words, instead of a 0.75, it might be a 0.78, maybe a 0.80, but that would be the most, because you can't oversize it to get the on the right pallet, right size of pallets on the truck, and the right weight on the truck. So it ties together.
Well, here's a question for you. You just touched on the truckload. I understand that when you fill up a truck full of bundle wood, it's going to come close to the weight limits. Is that correct?
Well, you always want it to wait out before it cubes out. That's what I've always said in the business. So that's fine. I really don't care. But the thing is that you need to have consistent weights so you know what's going on your pallet and you can predict what the truck's going to weigh. The last thing you really want to do is have a truck A come back because it's overweight, and they will, or B, when they roll across your scale, they are overweight on an axle or somewhere on the truck. And then you have to pull the load apart to make it consistent and make it road legal. So what you want to do really in the whole key of the business is control the variables. If you can control the variables, you can be successful. And I'll give you one example of a variable. You have to kiln wood now. There's just no way around it unless you're on the West Coast where they don't have that regulatory issues like we do on the East Coast. But if you can kiln all your wood down to say, for instance, 14% wood moisture content, you'll never mold. You'll never mildew because it takes 15% to get down to where you kill all the mold and mildew spores. So if you can do that and stay consistent, 15% and below, then you can control your moisture content and you can pretty well predict what your weight per piece is going to be, as long as you're cutting your piece consistent. Then you know what you can build your bundle to and make sure that you got a full bundle in there and that you can, on this particular case, cube out, and it doesn't matter. The weight out comes when you load the truck and you'll find out. But you've got to make the cubes and you got to make them legally. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. If you got like 5 bundles, or they do it by a ratio. So if you've got so many bundles in their store that are out of size, not only will they throw those off, but they throw everything off sale. Whether it had in the proper size bundles or not, everything goes off sale because that ratio kicks it off sale. And the last thing you want is a recall. That's the kiss of death for anybody. It doesn't look good, and they look bad. And when they say to you, where do you want me to start with this recall of 300 stores that we just distributed all your product to, it doesn't feel very good. So that's why this industry has had to mature, because it gets expensive if you don't get mature, you don't get savvy to the processes and the consistency that you need to be successful.
Well, I assume in any contract you have with these larger buyers, the contract has lots of details and lots of penalties for the producers.
Pages and pages and pages. To navigate your way around that, you pretty much need a lawyer to figure all that out. They send this to you, and it's just pretty much assumed that it's agreed to by you accepting their orders. But you do need to sign it, and they'll hound you to get that stuff back. You're pretty much at their mercy. Are they fair? They try to be. But in general, they're not in business to make you look good. You're in business to make them look good. So if they have a problem, most times you have to eat it. So by being consistent and transparent, you don't have those problems. Now, one of the things they will do, they'll fine you if the pallet isn't packaged properly. They'll fine you if the pallet isn't packed properly and it doesn't fit into their racks properly because it's too high or too wide and they can't get enough pallets in that pallet rack. They'll fine you because the pallets are overweight as it goes across their scales, because then they can't pack their trucks consistently. If you schedule a truck to be picked up, and if it's your responsibility and that truck doesn't show up at their plant on time, you'll get a fine. They'll fine you for anything they can because they figured out that that's a profit center. And then the best thing is that most guys, even though you might give them, say, 1% or net 30 days, they take the 1% and they pay you in 45. So you have to be prepared as a facility to carry that product for almost 2 months, plus the months that you bought it before and had to process it. and then be prepared to give them a cash discount for all those months that you've carried it for. So it does make it difficult to operate in this environment, and that's where they've kind of separated a lot of people that can handle this type of thing. There are good manufacturer, quote, distributors out there that are willing to help you with inventory and to do things as your partner, and they should. So by you forecasting and getting proper forecasts from them, you let them know how many loads you can make at their specification. They should be able to tell you what they need you to make and what the ratio is per month or however they want it to roll, and give you these orders well in advance. Then you can secure success. But if you just sit around and waiting nowadays for just-in-time type orders or shipments, you'll get eaten alive.
Well, I got a question. What is the shipping season these days? It's no longer all in the winter and none in the summer, is it?
No, it's this last year, which I think is an anomaly, but and not only did it never stop, but it grew to very, very large levels of demand. And that's, come on, people were at home and there wasn't a lot of stuff to do. But some of them got reintroduced into the product and to the ambiance and the warmth of it, especially with the prices of the utilities going sky high. Buying a bundle of firewood here and there was a pretty good deal for them. And since it was just a few people, since it was a few bundles being bought by a whole ton of people, the demand never really stopped. And it hasn't stopped this year so far, including all the way up to now that I'm talking to you. As a manufacturer, we try not to oversell. We underpromise and overdeliver. And a lot of people don't do that. That's where they get in trouble. So we stay within our limits. We know what we can do and what we can't do. We've made that mistake in the past. I've been in this business for 30 years. So you learn by your mistakes and you move on, and you try and have as much integrity as you can and admit to your mistakes, and the successful people don't repeat them. And that's what we try and do with Lost Coast.
In some woodworking operations like sawmill, the theory is you run wide open, because if you don't run wide open, you don't make any money most of the time. But you also try to sell all your capacity. You don't want to wait around for an order. You want to fill the bucket. You want to fill your capacity ahead of time with known buyers. Is that what you guys do?
Yeah. I mean, we have, the flip side of firewood and the flip side season is mulch. And if you take a 2 cubic foot bag of mulch, it equals a 0.75 bundle of firewood. They just grind it up and there's air in between it. They fluff it out. So a lot of these mulch manufacturers will make bundles of firewood in their off season that they're not making mulch and shipping mulch, which is a big business. So we'll use those yards in all the off seasons to make inventory. And not only do we ship it, but we also build it up so they can have it in inventory when we need it. And that's what we do in our yards, and what we require in all the yards is to be able to build and hold some inventory. So, we're not going on an order by order basis. We give them orders. Like right now, we've just given out probably, I'd say 15 yards, their orders for the entire next season, and the shipping waves for all the customers that we do. So we get that from our vendors so that we know how to plan. And we pretty much demand that, because if not, you just get set for a problem. And this last year, for instance, in February, when they had those big, huge storms, there was a lot of people just screaming for wood. And our end people that we sell to weren't necessarily screaming for wood. They had it and they could get it out. The problem was there was such a demand that you'd never seen before, is they couldn't get it in and across their docks fast enough. And they couldn't get it in fast enough because they didn't have the labor to receive it at their distribution centers. And anybody who's been in the firewood business, in a bundled firewood business for any period of time, knows you can't store bundled firewood in a trailer. So the trucks don't show up at your yard and take the orders because they have nowhere to deliver. And then they scream and complain that they're out of firewood. And you talk to the buyer and he goes, yeah, we're out and we want you to ship it, but we can't have the dock space because you're a lower priority. So what I started to say about 80% of the market goes offshore, 20% is domestic, 5% of that goes into the mulch and firewood market, the complete downfall. And since the business has constricted so much, there's very little mulch and firewood material left to take, because there's only 20% in the domestic market, we get 5%. So everything's been shrunk down because there's not as much demand, there hasn't been as much supply. Now, hopefully that'll change, but as it changes, we're seeing what I think is going to be historic inflation. So, you know, we've had to take a really good close look at that. Anybody who's going to be successful in a yard is going to look at their costs and make sure they've got things covered. And you got to make sure that you treat people fair and properly, because everybody needs to make a profit down the road. One of my favorite sayings is I got done at I think it was a Home Depot meeting. And I said to the sales, the regional sales guy and the national sales manager for that division, I said, I see the part where you make money and I see the part where you make money. Well, where's the part where I get to make money? So it's got to work for everybody. And if you have integrity and consistency and you get these people to believe in them and you can produce consistently with integrity, they'll stay with you. And when you have problems or issues, they'll work with you. But, you know, I've had situations where people get awarded a different territory, or one that they didn't go with us in a territory, went with us in another area, and that's fine. Then all of a sudden they call us. This guy isn't producing and he's not doing what he said he would do. Can you help us out? Most times we can, but I mean, we didn't plan for that. We've had big companies who, in like their waves last year, they ordered close to, I think it was about 88 truckloads on their first wave over like September, October, November. We filled them in with 97 trucks in between the 88. And, you know, you got to have some ability to handle those. Not everything came from the same facility. So you got to have some redundancy if you're going to be, you know, to play with the big boxes and be able to handle their surges and handle the things that they expect you to. Otherwise, they'll just drop you and they'll go to the next guy that can do it. So I don't suggest, if you're a small yard wanting to get into the business, that you try and approach and do something like that. What you need to do is partner up with either a manufacturer distributor or a good broker that can take you into some of these places. But if you're just starting out or you're trying to figure out what you want to be in the market, my suggestion is that you partner up at first with somebody who can take their label to market with your product.
So you'd be a sort of a private label producer. You're not putting your label on, you're putting the other companies on, but you're moving the wood and learning the business. So you're hopefully the person that's more experienced and bigger is going to guide you till you can figure out how this business really works.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like myself, if a yard comes in and wants to be a manufacturer for us, they've got to meet our specifications, and we have a crew of people that go out and work with them all through the season. We show up at the yards and make sure we measure wood, we look at their inventory and make sure that everything is up to proper speed. So if you can make sure that you can convince one of these retailers or one of these big wholesalers that you can give them the product that they want when you want it, that's great. But if you can't do that, then I suggest you partner up. And we've had people that are smaller yards. We've got a guy in Indiana that's he's a very small producing yard. He produces maybe 15 truckloads a year for us. When he has one, he calls us and we take it. And yeah, we do have a lot of small guys that, you know, we're helping to feed. And when you look at it with all our yards, we're feeding over 1,000 mouths a day. And a lot of people don't understand that, but that's just the way it is. And, you know, we're very, very proud of that and very happy that they're able to earn a living, and we're able to not only earn a living, but be successful so we can go back and order more because they've met our specs. Our companies are happy and we don't have any problems. It makes everybody's life a lot easier if you do it right the first time. Then you don't have to worry about it.
I got a question for you about packaging. We've gone through all kinds of materials with stretch wrap and shrink wrap and bags. Where do you think the future's going?
Well, I've seen these biodegradable netting. Uh, there is also biodegradable plastic. You've got a unique situation in that this wood has jagged corners and edges, can cause splinters, bruising, and if you don't have something strong enough to really hold it in and hold its integrity, chances are good they're going to drop it. It's going to break open. It's going to drop on their foot when they go to put it in a basket. So for me, my best bet over and over has been heat shrink or stretch wrap, using either a heat tunnel or a bundler. So, and you might ask, well, doesn't that hurt the environment because you're putting all that plastic in the environment? We ask for it to be renewable, and we pay more for it. We also get a thicker plastic than most people get, so that it doesn't break. Same thing with the stretch netting around the pallet. We want them to use more stretch netting, and we want it to be of a lower gauge so that it has more integrity. And if they complain that they have to use a pocket knife to open it instead of tearing the stuff, that's tough luck. That's what I want to hear. So one of the biggest things, you take into account how the pallet's going to look on a retail floor, and you want it to be consistent. You want the labels to look out. You want people to see that you're packing a really good product in that pallet, and they feel good about taking it. But you don't want them to have them reach up for it and have it hit their head when they're pulling it off a pallet, because they want to get 80 bundles on a pallet. So they're maximizing how much they get on a truck. To me, that's being greedy. To other people, that's operating sharp and smart. But I don't think it's great for integrity, because we've shown time and time again where those people reaching for those bundles, they fall over. A lot of people got to realize most of the people buying these bundles are women. And so they got to be able to pick them up and handle them. And if they can't, or they try, you got a problem, and it's going to come back on you. So like I said, you got to have the right length and the right width and height so that you can control the variable, which is how much is in that bundle, how much it's going to weigh.
Okay, one question I really wanted to ask you is, if you look behind myself, this is a virtual photograph. If you see the wedges, where do you think the trend's going to be as far as how the biggest dimension is? I think, in my opinion, people are liking smaller wood, at least for stoves. Maybe outdoors it doesn't matter as much. Trying to dry it in the kiln, the smaller pieces dry faster. What's your opinion about how big that piece needs to be?
Some people tell you the biggest piece you can use is the biggest piece it can be, because it'll burn hotter and longer. Other people tell you they like medium size. Some like really small. A lot of people, believe it or not, buy kindling and use it to burn. I was in a store one day and I saw a lady put 30 bundles of our kindling in a basket. And I came up to her and I asked her and identified myself. This is outside of Chicago. And identified myself and I said, "What are you doing with all this kindling? You only need a little bit to start a fire." She says, "I don't start a fire. I use it. I like it." So, it goes from big to small. But here's what I will tell you. Here's what our specification basically says. You have to be able to take a piece of wood, and a lady needs to be able to pick it up with her hand like this. So if the end is bigger, it doesn't work. And that's the idea.
So is that a 3-inch split?
Yeah, about 3 inch. That'd be about right.
Yeah,
that'd be about right. I mean, it's just when I walk into a yard, I pick up a piece of wood with my hand and I hold it like this. And it either is or it isn't. If it's too wide, I say, "Hey, it needs more split." So yeah.
Well, our industry is changing. Anything else you want to add to the discussion today?
Just that this industry is emerging and it is evolving. I think the retailers are beginning to pay much more attention to this as a SKU, as an item. And so they're looking for more sophistication than they have been having. They're looking for proper labeling. They're looking for proper bundle size, as I mentioned, and consistency in the pallet so they can get out to the stores and they look good. And, our job is to make these retailers look good. So everything and anything we can do to help them do that helps us. And that's basically about it, Harry.
Well, I really appreciate it. For the audience here, Geoff has attended several of these. He's gotten up and spoke, and when he spoke, everybody got quiet and listened because he was telling us what's on the other side of the curtain. So we greatly appreciate it. We hope people will take this to heart. And thank you very much, Geoff Friedman of East Coast Resources.
My pleasure. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.